So, yeah, there's a lot in what you said. I think for a lot of people, in the way, and perhaps traditionally, but certainly in the way a lot of the traditions have been brought into the West, there's probably been an assumption that, well, if you realize you're all one, and we go beyond ego in a sense, then we're all just exactly the same. The personality. Somebody will say your personality goes away. So I hear that.
Let's make a distinction there. Right? Let's make a distinction between personality and unique self. It's a critically important distinction. Gurdjieff used to talk about the difference between personality and essence. So when we talk about personality includes my false self. Right? Personality includes my pathology. Right? Personality includes my Enneagram type. My Enneagram type, though, tells me who I'm not. Right? And as my Enneagram type, my personality, right, tells me at its non-enlightened expression level, right, tells me about, how I reacted to my parents, how I reacted to my original caretakers, right, about that whole set of conflicts, which the last 100 years of development began to realize that we're uniquely formed in those early years. And I read a lot of Alice Miller, and she told me that actually, right, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my personality. So that's one. That's personality. Personality expresses itself pre-enlightenment. Personality expresses itself, right, and is fully intact and informed before I actually make contact with true self. Right? Personality, let's use it just for the sake of our conversation here to make the terms easy and accessible to everybody. Personality equals ego. Okay? So let me, with your permission, right, let me try and talk about a unique self as a core part of evolutionary integral theory. So let me use the term separate self. All the traditions, right, and the great traditions talked and said, if you locate, and particularly in the East, but Western mysticism as well, if you locate yourself in your separate self is the source of suffering. Your separate self is overcome by a death terror. The way you respond to that death terror is through grasping competition, right? You respond to the death terror by killing the other guy to make sure death has its due, but not you. Right? Murder, right, emerges in the world at the same time as the emergence of the separate egoic self. So we all know that the traditions, the great traditions of the East and Western mysticism, talked about moving beyond the separate self, right, into enlightenment in order to move beyond suffering, and in order to be able to express love, which in this tradition's great teaching, comes from the knowledge that we're all part of the same true self. So that's one great teaching. Now here's the move we make, okay? And I'm going to look at it on the eastern side and on the western side of the street. What we say is, yes, we need to move beyond our separate self, absolutely. But that the East, right, made a partial insight. But in our evolution, we begin to understand that the East confused separateness and uniqueness. Right? That actually, you can move beyond your separate self, locate yourself in your own actual experience as part of the seamless code of the universe, and at the same time experience the true nature of your uniqueness. Your uniqueness, which is not limited, right, to the personality structures, but after the personality is purified, what still emerges is the particular and unique grain of wood, right, your fingerprint, right, which expresses itself up and down the great chain of being, your fingerprint in your body, your fingerprint in your spirit, right, the unique expression of you, which in the evolutionary emergent of perspective, and this is what's critical when we talk about evolution, the idea of perspective really only came online fully in the last several hundred years. We understood that perspective, all of modernism and deconstruction is based on perspective. So perspective means that I not only have, right, my true self has a perspective. That perspective is absolutely unique. And in that sense, unique self is not only a mythic idea in a kind of Judeo-Christian frame, but it's actually, right, an integral idea, right, a trans-lineage idea, which every tradition can embrace in its way, right? My unique perspective is my uniqueness. So I've got to move beyond my separateness, but I've got to retain my uniqueness. And I don't need to jettison, right, uniqueness in order to move beyond my separate self. Now, on the other side of the street, right, on the Western side of the street, right, the West said, well, Western teaching also wants to move beyond suffering, right? Same deal. Western teaching also wants to have love. But Western teaching says the opposite of Eastern teaching. Western teaching at its core says, in order to have love and to move beyond suffering, we need to be in relationship as separate selves. Because in the relationship, in the encounter between Craig and Marc, that's where love happens. That's where responsibility happens. That's where obligation happens. That's where compassion happens. So the West actually insisted on maintaining the separate self, right, in order to, right, get all the goods of loving. The exact opposite of the East. But the West made the same mistake as the East, just on the other side of the street. And this is the big new unfolding of what we're calling integral evolutionary theory. Right? The West said that you have to be separate. Right? No, you actually don't need to be separate to have a relationship. We can actually be part of the seamless code of the universe. You only need to be unique. That uniqueness itself is sufficient. And this is the way that I'm talking about it, that Ken and I are talking about it together now, right? Uniqueness itself is sufficient, right? Craig and Marc's unique selves are sufficient to create our relationship, even if we experience ourselves fully in enlightened space as part of the seamless code of the universe. So once you deconstruct the confusion between separateness and uniqueness, we allow the East and West to come together in a true integral embrace in which we move beyond our egoic separate selves and emerge, in Buddhist terms, in the shining uniqueness of our bodhicitta. So that becomes the expression of unique face, which is not personality, but emerges fully, let me say, only after realization, right, of my original face. When we just talked to Don about it, our friend Don Beck, so Don viewed that as he was very excited about it as a kind of demarcating expression of yellow, of second tier in that kind of spiral dynamics world. Does that help clarify it a little bit?